This happened a few summers ago. I had just graduated high school, and like most kids my age, I wanted one last adventure before life got serious. For me and my friends, that meant driving out into the Wyoming wilderness to climb the plateaus and celebrate freedom. It was supposed to be one of the best days of our lives. Instead, it turned into a nightmare I'll never forget. There were 4 of us, me, my best friend Alex, and our buddies, Nick and Jack. Alex had the car, an old Jeep she adored, and the experience. She loved climbing and she loved adventure. The rest of us? We were just along for the ride, carrying a few beers to celebrate once we reached the top. We drove past the Flaming Gorge lookout, took in the view, then spotted the perfect spot along Highway 141. Huge rock formations just begging to be climbed. The climb itself wasn't bad. About 15 minutes of steady scrambling, and then we were at the top, surrounded by endless stretches of Wyoming wilderness. The view was breathtaking. We cracked open the beers and laughed about school, life, the future. For a while it was perfect. That's when I noticed it. A red pickup truck flying down the highway. It suddenly screeched to a halt, and then started reversing. Right there, in the middle of the road. We all got quiet. Something about it didn't feel right. The truck backed into the small gravel lot where Alex had parked her Jeep. A man stepped out. From the top of the plateau, we couldn't see much detail, but his movements were off. Wrong. He circled the Jeep, peered through the windows, tugged at the handles. He was trying to break in. Nick shouted down at him, just to let him know the car wasn't unattended. The man flinched, looked up, spotted us, and waved. For a second, we thought it was over, that he'd leave. But he didn't. He kept trying to get inside. Jack shouted down that we were armed, a bluff, a stupid one. The man looked up, smiled, and shouted back, "Me too, kiddo." And then he raised something into the air, a gun. Panic shot through us. We scrambled down the rocks, yelling, trying to scare him off. But the moment we hit the ground, the sound of glass shattering froze us in place. He'd smashed Alex's window. We charged forward, but he spun, gun in hand, and aimed it directly at us. "Stop! Hands up!" We had no choice. He forced us to toss our phones and wallets onto the ground. Then, with the gun still pointed at us, he calmly picked them up. His face came into view now. An older man, scraggly beard, maybe in his 50s. Unremarkable, forgettable. The kind of man who could disappear into any crowd. After pocketing our things, he pulled out a knife and stabbed one of the Jeep's tires, just to make sure we weren't going anywhere. Then he climbed back into his truck, a truck with no license plates, and drove off into the emptiness of Wyoming. We were left standing in silence, shaken, furious, helpless. Alex was furious about her Jeep. I couldn't stop shaking from the gun pointed at my chest. We changed the tire as fast as we could, then sped off. But the truck was gone. When we finally reached town, we called the police. We gave them a description, but without plates, there was little they could do. The man was never caught. That summer was supposed to be unforgettable, and it was, just not in the way I imagined. To this day, I can't shake the image of that man waving his gun at us with a smile, like it was all some twisted game. And the worst part? He's still out there. Somewhere. I'm 30 years old, and I share a 2-floor house with my sister. The setup is unusual. It's what you'd call a mother-daughter house. 2 floors, 2 kitchens. My sister lives downstairs and I live upstairs. But here's the thing. She's not home a lot. Most of the time, she's at her boyfriend's place, which is about 20 miles away. That leaves me, alone, in this house that's bigger than it needs to be, and a little too quiet at night. Now, I'd like to think being 30 years old, I'm not the kind of guy to get freaked out being home alone, but sometimes I do, especially at night. This happened on one of those nights. I was in the living room upstairs, sitting on the couch, watching a scary movie. My entire floor is an open layout, living room, dining room, kitchen, all one space. My couch sits in the middle of it, with the TV on one side, and a wide, empty darkness behind me. If you're the type to get spooked easily, you'd understand why that setup feels uncomfortable. It always feels like something could be standing behind me. The only light in the room came from the flicker of the TV. Every so often, I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see something move. Of course, there was nothing, just the shadows stretching across the room. When the movie ended, I brushed my teeth, turned off all the lights, and went to bed. I fell asleep quickly, but only for about 2 hours. Around 1 a.m., I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Maybe a noise, maybe just a bad dream. But then, I heard it. A voice. It sounded like my sister's. It was coming from downstairs. Now I knew she wasn't supposed to be home. She hadn't mentioned coming back. But it wasn't muffled like she was outside. It sounded like she was inside the house. Groggy and half asleep, I thought maybe she'd gotten into an argument with her boyfriend and came back unexpectedly. Maybe she was calling my name. I stumbled out of bed, still drowsy, and turned on the hallway light. The house was dead quiet until I heard it again. My sister's voice, clearer this time, calling my name from downstairs. I called back, asking what she wanted, but she didn't respond. So I made my way down into the dark, fumbling for the light switch. My heart was pounding in my chest, though I tried to ignore it. Finally, I found the switch in her kitchen and flicked it on. The dim bulb buzzed to life, slowly filling the downstairs apartment with light. That's when I realized no one was there. Her living room, empty. Her kitchen, empty. Her bedroom, empty. There was no sign of her or her boyfriend. I stood frozen for a moment, the silence pressing in on me. Then I called her name again, louder this time. Nothing. But just as I was about to turn around, I heard it. A loud thud. It came from her bedroom. The same bedroom I had just checked. The one I knew was empty. My stomach dropped. My fight or flight kicked in, and I chose flight. I ran back upstairs like a little kid, slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and tried to call her. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I sat there in bed, wide awake, my heart racing, convinced someone, or something, was down there. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me, and I drifted off to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, the first thing I saw was a text from my sister. She asked why I called her so many times at 1 a.m. I asked her if she'd come home last night. She said no. She had been at her boyfriend's the entire night. I went back downstairs, determined to check her room in daylight. I wanted to find whatever had fallen the night before, but when I opened her bedroom door, there was nothing on the floor. Nothing that could have made that sound. To this day, I tell myself it must have been a hallucination, some trick my half-asleep brain played on me. because the alternative is far more terrifying. That the voice I heard wasn't my sister's at all.
This happened 3 years ago. My brother Luke had just graduated college, and the two of us were driving cross-country from California to New Jersey in a rented U-Haul. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. But when we crossed into New Mexico, things went very wrong. Before we left, everyone warned us. Don't stop in New Mexico, keep driving, stick to the highway. We promised we would. The plan was simple. Gas up in Arizona, then push through to Texas without stopping. But the U-Haul guzzled more fuel than we expected. Soon the gauge dipped below a quarter tank. Too low, too risky. We had no choice but to stop. A small town appeared on our GPS about 10 miles off the highway. When we got there, everything felt wrong. The streets were empty. The buildings sun-faded, run down. The few locals we saw didn't smile. They just stared. At the gas station, Luke filled up while I stayed in the truck. One man leaned against the convenience store smoking. He didn't look away once. I told myself we were just outsiders, but my chest felt tight, like we'd stepped somewhere we weren't supposed to be. Fuel wasn't the problem anymore. Getting back to the highway was. We could literally see the highway from town, but every road we took curved away, dead-ended, or turned to dirt. The GPS glitched, sending us in circles. It was like the whole town was designed to keep us trapped. After 20 minutes of this, Luke snapped. He drove back to the gas station for directions. The clerk smiled too much. He told Luke to take a back road, 17 miles in the opposite direction of the highway. Luke came back pale. "I don't trust him," he said. "Something's wrong." And he was right. We pulled over trying to figure out what to do next. That's when it happened. A dusty pickup truck slowed beside us. The driver rolled down his window. "You folks lost?" he asked. Luke hesitated before admitting we were trying to reach the highway. He repeated the directions the gas clerk had given him. The man's expression hardened. His voice dropped. "Don't, doctor. That road leads straight into cartel territory. If you go there, you won't come back." He quickly gave us another route, a hidden gravel road we would have missed completely. Then, without another word, he drove off. We followed his directions. After a few miles, the gravel path wound back toward civilization. And finally, the blessed sight of an on-ramp to the highway. We never looked back. To this day, I don't know if the gas station clerk was working with criminals, or if the whole town was just some kind of trap. But I do know one thing. If that stranger hadn't stopped to warn us, I don't think we'd be here to tell this story. I was home alone for an entire week once, back when I was still a teenager living with my parents. That almost never happened because my parents rarely went out, but one summer it did. My mom's rich friend, Patty, invited my parents on a trip, and since she was paying for everything, they couldn't say no. So, for the first time, I had the entire house to myself. No siblings, no parents, no one. Just me, alone, in my parents' house in Newark, Ohio, Licking County. Yeah, that's actually the name. Our house sat on a quiet road that barely had a handful of cars pass through each day. Behind it stretched a wall of thick woods, dense, dark, and endless. We had a big deck overlooking the backyard with a little fish pond and even an above-ground swimming pool. It was peaceful during the day, but at night, The silence could feel suffocating. It was a Thursday night, July 2013. I remember clearly because earlier that day I'd been talking with my friends about plans for the weekend. Around midnight, I was sitting out on the deck smoking a little weed, my speaker playing music. It was calm, until I thought I heard something, a voice. It was faint coming from the woods. I paused, turned the music down, and listened. Nothing. Maybe I was imagining things. So I shrugged it off and turned the music back up. But then, it happened again. This time it was clear. A man's voice calling from the trees. "Hey! Over here!" I froze. The woods were about 30 yards away, dark and still. The voice wasn't too far, close enough that I knew it wasn't just an echo or some TV inside. At first, I thought it was kids messing around, maybe playing manhunt or some game. But the voice called out again, "Hey, over here, we need help." That's when I realized it wasn't a kid. The voice was deep, too deep. And, "We need help?" My stomach sank. I stood up slowly, scanning the tree line. Then the voice shouted again, this time directly in front of me. "Straight in front of you. Please, come help us." My body went cold. I hesitated, then called out, "Who is that?" The voice came back instantly. "We just need help. We're stuck in the woods." Something about the tone was off. Too urgent, almost rehearsed. Still, against my better judgment, I walked down the steps of the deck and onto the grass. My heart was pounding. "I'm coming! Where are you?" I shouted. The man's voice echoed back, clear and sharp. "Right in front of you!" "I see you." I stopped, dead in my tracks. That's when I realized something was horribly wrong. If he could see me, why couldn't I see him? And what did he mean? Stuck in the woods? That made no sense. I took a slow step backward, my eyes straining to pierce the darkness. "Are you alone?" I called out. No reply. Silence. That was enough for me. My gut screamed to run. I backed up all the way to the deck, never turning my back on the woods. I went inside and locked every single door. I sat in the living room, still high, trying to convince myself I'd overreacted. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. Because then, the voice came again. Only this time it wasn't from the woods. It was closer, in the backyard. I heard splashing water, like something moving through the pool or the pond. My blood ran cold. I crept to the window, slowly peeled back the blinds, and looked outside. At first, nothing, just the dark outline of the yard. Then I heard it, a laugh, and I saw him, a man, his head barely visible, peeking out from behind the pool, dark, medium-length hair. He was watching me. I froze, staring back, until I finally yanked the blinds shut. My heart was racing. And then, bang! The window shook violently as something slammed against it. The man's voice screamed from the other side, "Help! Help!" But it wasn't a cry for help. It was mocking, twisted. I lost it. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Get the hell out of here! The police are coming!" I yelled it again and again, trying to sound crazier than he was. On the other side, I could hear him laughing. The laugh started loud, then slowly faded as if he was walking away. I stood there shaking, every muscle in my body tight until I was sure he was gone. Somehow I managed to sleep that night. Maybe it was the weed, maybe it was shock. But when I woke up, everything felt unreal, like a nightmare that had bled into reality. To this day, I wonder, how long had he been watching me? And if I hadn't stopped halfway to those woods, would I have ever come back out? "5 years ago, my girlfriend and I went on a budget trip to Croatia. She was half Croatian and had always wanted to see where her family came from. It was supposed to be an adventure, but what happened in the port city of Rijeka still haunts me to this day. We'd been wandering away from the tourist spots when we found a tiny local restaurant. Cheap, authentic, hidden from crowds. At first, it felt like a perfect find. The food was incredible, and we were laughing, enjoying ourselves. Then a group of 5 men walked in, rough-looking, the kind of men you'd avoid in any city. They sat close, loud, watching. I tried to ignore it, but my girlfriend froze. She leaned across the table and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." Confused, I followed her out. Only once we were in the street did she explain. She'd overheard the men talking, not about what they wanted to do to us, but what they were going to do. Separate us, hurt her. Use a man named Luca to handle the rest. Her voice shook, and I knew she wasn't exaggerating. I glanced back. The men had followed us out, and the moment they saw me looking, they started walking toward us. We ran, through silent, empty streets, block after block of lifeless neighborhoods. I could hear their footsteps behind us, closing the gap. For 10 minutes straight, we sprinted until finally, blessedly, we stumbled back into the crowded city center. The men stopped chasing instantly. They just stood there, watching, like predators who had just lost their prey. Shaking, we sat at a cafe. An older Croatian man overheard our frantic whispers and leaned over. When we told him what had happened, his expression turned grim. He told us the restaurant we'd eaten at was a known hangout for criminals, that we'd basically walked straight into their den. And then he said something I'll never forget. "You're lucky you ran when you did. People disappear here." We spent the rest of our trip locked inside our Airbnb, terrified to leave. To this day, I'm grateful my girlfriend understood the language. If she hadn't, if we'd stayed just a little longer in that restaurant, I don't think either of us would have made it home.